Liam Carr, I mean, this is a comment on Labour, isn't it? We had 13 years in office, couldn't deliver it, and actually a lot of these people are ex-Labour supporters.
Yeah, they are, but I think we have to look at the Conservatives' record on this. We've had the scrapping of one North East, we've had the sacking of a North East minister, and it's Labour's policy to reinstate that position. And there is already a party which is standing up for the needs of people in the North East, and it's called the Labour Party.
Well, the problem is that these people have seen what the Labour Party's delivered. They're not satisfied. They're not confident you will deliver on your promises, and they think that actually you need a bit of a poke from a new party. Yeah,
there is that, and some of the concerns are well-founded about the neglect of this region by the current Conservative and Liberal
by
coalition.
Labour before it. That's the allegation.
You can say that, but they're standing in this election, not in 2010. And I think that we can have this argument here about structures, but people out there are struggling, and I don't think we need to be arguing about structures. We need to be arguing about the issues which affect people's lives.
Helen Flynn, I mean, Liberal Democrats were always the party focused on delivering local power to local people. It's rather got lost in that, and again, rather than turning to you, they're setting up their own parties. The one in Yorkshire, isn't it? There's Yorkshire First as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy with Hilton's situation and what he's done. But what I'd like to see more of, and maybe you starting up this party is going to provide the platform for it to arise, but it's the people themselves actually feeling, you know, you're right, the North East has, I believe, been very badly neglected, as have vast areas of the North. And you know, I do believe that there are some things that we have done in coalition government around, you know, the Regional Growth Fund and that kind of thing, and setting up the LEPs. But there is still a perceived, and most people would say an actual divide between North and South. So I think...
Is the answer, I suppose, to work within the political parties? Presumably you'd prefer that than rather than see people, you know, throwing the stones from outside. I mean, this is a bit of a pattern, isn't it, of people turning away from the Westminster parties, UKIP as well. But they don't see the Westminster parties as doing anything.
It's something we have to wake up to. Obviously, as a Liberal Democrat, I do believe in greater devolution of powers. That's our natural position, because what's local is very real and immediate to people. So I do believe in greater devolution of powers.
Here you are with a huge opportunity in government, and it's not been delivered.
Well, we've delivered some of it through the Localism Act. There have been powers handed to communities through that, and it will take a while for that to kind of work its way through, because it's all relatively new. So there are things there that can, you know, hand greater power to people. But I have to say I do have some sympathy for the position, given the plight of the North East.
Hilton Dawson, how are you going to judge your success here? I mean, is success actually, you know, grabbing a couple of thousand votes, keeping a Conservative MP in Stockton South, for instance, a Liberal Democrat MP in Redcar, and getting Labour MPs in? Or have you got any realistic proposition of winning?
I think the first thing that we're going to do, definitely, is to revitalise the debate. We're going to get more people engaged in politics. We're going to hopefully get more people voting. I think we're good for democracy. I think we're a breath of fresh air to the local political scene. But what we absolutely aim to do is get people elected.
From the sidelines.
We absolutely aim to get people elected to Parliament to make the case for the North East, and only the North East, on the floor.
OK, all right, well, we'll see what happens next. Let's talk about another big issue, as referred to there, schools and education. And in the North East, they're facing problems recruiting the next generation, it seems, of head teachers. More than half of the heads in the region who replied to a survey say they're considering leaving the profession early. Now, they blame rising workloads and government reforms for adding to that pressure. Ministers insist, though, they're making school leadership more attractive by giving heads greater control. Luke Walton reports.
Can I see people walking smartly, please?
Whether it's keeping order in the playground or keeping up standards in the classroom, the job of head teacher has always come with heavy responsibilities. But for heads like Rhiannon Rowe, the pressure has grown.
Over the weekend, there's a lot of work really to be done with making sure we've got classes in place.
We asked her to keep a diary of her schedule over the last 7 days.
It came to approximately 56 hours, which basically was perhaps a little more than I'd expected, but when you think about things like the evening work, the work that gets done at weekends and out of school hours, because one thing that's important for people to remember is that heads work is not 9 to 3:15.
But it's not the hours she's complaining about. She sees the real problem as the constant uncertainty created by everything from Ofsted inspections to government reforms.
There's been a very fast rate of change within education, and the head teacher is ultimately responsible. And sometimes we feel a little bit like football managers, I think, in that if something goes wrong, you're going to be the head that rolls. And I do think that this might put off middle leadership from wanting to move further than middle leadership.
For all that, Mrs Rowe is happy in her job, but others seem less so. More than 100 head teachers responded to a survey by the Teachers Network Schools North East. Around 2/3 said they were considering leaving the job before retirement age. Among the most commonly cited reasons were workload, political interference and pressure from Ofsted.
Our concern is that we need really good quality school leadership in the North East. We need those leaders to be taking up those posts and staying within it and attracting new people in. And we're hearing from governors that they're not getting the applications through. People aren't up for that challenge because of that instability that we have in the system currently. So we need a period of stability to make sure that we can grow those new leaders.
So is there a danger we put people off from wanting to run schools like this one? Well, the government rejects any suggestion of an impending crisis in head teacher recruitment and retention. It points out that vacancy rates are actually very low, and it says by giving extra powers and freedoms to heads through the academy programme, it's making the job more attractive, not less.
What we need more heads to come into the system, but we're doing that by making it a situation where academies are more available to people, it's a greater degree of freedoms, and we want to get out of the way of head teachers who are doing all they can to support their pupils, and we do that also by giving them more money. The £269 that the government has given per pupil across Northumberland will surely help.
So could this be part of the solution? David Baldwin is executive head teacher of not one but 2 schools. This secondary in Wallsend and another in South Shields. An approach he says helps nurture the heads of the future.
What it allows is people who you might see as assistant heads or deputy heads inside a school, they can be given an opportunity to really test out their own leadership skills in a safe environment with someone who has the experience, who will take the ultimate accountability, but they can then work with that person to experience the excitement, really, of what headship is all about.
How the young are taught remains a hot debate among politicians and public alike. But that education also depends on the people leading our schools. How to retain and recruit them is a vital calculation.
Luke Walton reporting. Helen Flynn, you're a school governor, I believe.
Yeah.
Does this tally with your experience of the pressure on heads and schools?
I think there is a lot of pressure at the moment on heads. Obviously, it's kind of tough accountability. It was interesting that you had 2 reports there, one from a primary school, and I think the other one was a secondary school head teacher. And I think that there are different problems for both those sectors. I think that secondary school heads, typically speaking, you know, they are able to take advantage of greater freedoms. They can, even though they are ultimately accountable, there's more layers underneath them, though they can share the responsibilities and delegate power down more. I think the problem is really at primary level, where head teachers, typically those schools are not able to convert to academies because they're just not big enough to be able to do it and have the confidence to do it with the structure behind them. So those head teachers, I think, are really feeling the stress. But hopefully things like the Teaching School Alliances, which we've set up through the coalition government,
schools
are helping.
Together.
Schools working together is making quite a big difference, and to standards as well, which obviously is what we're fundamentally interested in.
Possible solutions to this. I mean, Liam Carr, is this a surprise? Most of us have asked would probably say we want to retire early. That's not a hint, by the way, to my boss. These are high-pressure jobs, and why shouldn't they be?
They are high-pressure jobs, but particularly in rural schools in Northumberland, we're finding head teachers who are looking after 2 schools. We have head teachers who have to look after budgets, they have to manage staff, and they also have to teach in some of our smaller schools. And the problem that we're facing is that the best teachers don't want to come within a mile of these jobs, and it's because of the reforms that we're seeing. It's because of the pressure of Ofsted that were mentioned. And the 2 pledges there made by the sitting MP for Hexham, that they should get out of the way and let heads get out of the job, they're actually doing the opposite.
But isn't it just Michael Gove actually just saying, well, look, I want the best education possible for children in this country and I'm prepared to do something about it? That's fair enough, isn't it? That's acceptable pressure.
And you do that by working with heads, not by setting up this system, which is just like a top-down dictatorial system, he's removed £400 million from the schools budget to spend on his pet project of free schools. And that puts extra pressure on budgets and extra pressure on heads.
Helen Flynn, I mean, this is Lib Dem coalition, this is the allegation, letting Michael Gove play with the education system, do what he wants and not stopping him, isn't it?
Well, I mean, obviously we're in coalition, but we do have our own distinct policies when it comes to education.
Do you like everything Michael Gove's doing?
No. I think that most people would probably go along with that.
Why isn't your party stamping on him a bit more?
Well, David Laws has achieved a lot. I mean, obviously one of the major things we've achieved has been the pupil premium, where we're directly targeting funding at disadvantaged children to make sure that they can achieve just as well as their peers. And so that's a massively significant reform that we've brought in. The other thing that Liberal Democrats are very concerned about is harnessing the power of the professionals and working with the professionals as much as possible, because and investing them with more responsibility. Yes, but also trusting their professionalism.
Okay.
So I would say we're quite distinct in that way.
I mean, Liam Carr, I mean, the problem is change of government isn't going to solve this, is it? Because Labour will just come in with their next set of ideas. There'll be more constant revolution, more pressure.
Well, I've worked as a teacher for a lot of years now, and I've seen the effects of this. I think what we need is we need the best heads working in the most challenged schools, but we've got a system where heads are really put off going into challenging schools because Ofsted can come in at no notice and then brand them and their school.
Does that actually help them? Because rather than having to plan months and months for Ofsted, they've just got to run a good school.
Yeah, they do have to run a good school. And I'd just like to pick up on the point about David Laws. He's headed up the free school programme. He is diverting funds from every child.
That's not
well, he is the schools minister.
Yes, but
so he has to take some responsibility for his actions.
I think a year ago.
And what we're seeing is Lib Dems trying to distance themselves from the Conservatives, and they can't just check the voting records. They voted for all of these policies.
You will see from we're a democratic party, and you will see from the record of our conferences that we voted against free schools the last time. So as far as the party's concerned,
we're not going to get you to agree on this. So I think we'll have to agree. Just leave that there for the moment while we search for solutions. Now, when the sun is shining, it's easy to forget the scenes of swollen rivers and flooded homes which dominated the news last winter. But the problem, of course, hasn't gone away. Ministers say they're spending more than ever on flood protection and dealing with coastal erosion. But that didn't satisfy MPs on the Environment Select Committee this week. In a report published, they said maintenance work such as river dredging is at a bare minimum, and they warn that staffing cuts in the Environment Agency are putting communities at risk. Thurska Moulton MP Anne McIntosh chairs the committee.
While there's a role for physical flood defences, they are not the most cost effective. So there must be regular dredging and maintenance. For every £1 spent, then they get £8 saved in flood damage later, and that there must be more reliance on natural flood defences.
Well, amongst those hit by flooding were Simon and Gillian Kennington. They were forced to leave their home in Lanchester in County Durham in 2012 and have only recently actually been able to return. Our correspondent Mark Denton went to see them.
My daughter lost all of her toys, she lost her birthday presents that we'd just bought her. It was just devastating. I had to take plaster off the walls, the floors up, everything had to go out of this house. Downstairs, the kitchen was ripped out and everything. It looked like a bomb site. To be honest, when we came in the next day, the water had came up to about here, just through tidal marks and bit water that was left. We definitely need more flood protection because, me personally, I think it will definitely happen again. So they need to think about the people that it's affecting, because if they don't invest in it, then it's going to happen all the more, and it's going to wipe out more people's lives.
Simon Kennington, one of the many people who had to cope with the impact of flooding. Helen Flynn, this is MPs from all parties on this committee criticising, and flooding victims all saying what's being done is just not enough. Fair comment?
I mean, obviously we're undergoing the process of climate change, you know, apart from those people who don't think it's actually happening. So We've now got to kind of step up, I think, to the challenge that climate change does bring, and that is going to be more flooding. So there is a lot more that we do need to do.
More money, or do you have to manage expectations about what we can do?
I think in the ideal world, yes, more money, but obviously we're working in very stringent times. Hopefully down the line there'll be more money when the economy is obviously improving now. Hopefully it'll continue to improve, and there will be more money down the line. But in the meantime, we can be smarter with the money that we've got, and some of the recommendations in the report around kind of greater localisation of funding, so that actually the people who know that area where the river is, or where the sea is coming in and flooding, there's greater local knowledge about how to address those issues. So that's one thing, a good thing that's come out of the report.
I want to get Liam Carr in. We'll turn to the report in a minute. The government's spending a record amount, £3.5 billion on flood protection, but every time Labour says it needs to do more and more and more, there's no blank cheque here, is there?
There is no blank cheque, but what they did, one of the first acts of this government, was to cut flood defence spending by £100 million. And this is short-termism. We can see that spending on flood defences is one thing, but then having to clear up the mess that these floods create and the damage that these floods do to people's lives costs much more than that. So this is an investment for the future.
But the problem is it's not as simple as that, isn't it? Because if you could predict, you'd be a millionaire if you could predict where this was going to happen, how badly it's going to happen. And just to say, look, we need more money and more money, it's not a solution. They are spending more than any other government has ever done. You can't keep spending more.
Well, it looks... I was in Hexham the other day, which is a village just north of Hexham, which is affected by flooding. And the communities are doing their best. We've got people filling sandbags, we've got flood warnings in place, but these communities that are under threat from flooding have been let down badly by this government. They're sacking Environment Agency workers whose job it is to try and cope with these problems and mitigate. And as I've said before, mitigation against the effects of climate change is cheaper than dealing with the mess that it leaves behind.
Helen Flynn, haven't politicians got to be a bit more honest here, though, and say to some communities, look, being realistic, we cannot protect you?
There's an awful lot more that can be done. I mean, in terms of prevention.
However much we spend, there are some communities you are going to flood.
No, there's a lot more that we need to do in addressing climate change, about how you do take, and like I say, spending the money more smartly, which is about kind of reforesting the uplands, so you hold on to more of the groundwater further up, so that you can mitigate.
But are you confident your coalition government is actually doing much about climate change?
Well, I mean, as
you say yourself, there are deniers in there.
Well, not in my party, but no. I mean, there is a lot that we are doing, and this report does point out ways forward for us that we will definitely be adopting. But it is about prevention, because we do know these events are going to happen more and more. So we have to think much more long term about how we do mitigate against the effects of flooding, and that is in prevention rather than in cleaning up, as my colleague was saying here. So.
Okay. Thank you very much to both of you then.